We could talk about I was eating that cake like crazy while Erica was making it. I mean, we had nothing but cake going on. Oh. Hey, welcome to the Gathering 208 podcast. We are glad that you're here with us tonight with Kellen and I. If you heard me talking about cake, it is my oldest son's birthday. He turns 9 today. And so Erica was making cake for him all day yesterday. And so we were making a square cake, but we were making it out of round cake pans. So you got to cut the ends off, right? Yeah. So there's essentially the same amount of cake sitting that you're not going to use. So I was just like, because broken cake doesn't have calories, or how's that go? But I was just eating cake because I am an idiot. So, hey, welcome tonight. We are glad to have you with us. Kellen and I don't have a guest tonight. Oh, yeah, thank you. Our furnace just kicked on. If you can hear that, we're going to turn that off here in a second. But we don't have a guest tonight, so you just get to listen to us talk. We're going to talk about anxiety and stressors and home life and all that kind of things. And we'd love to have you part of the conversation. So if you have questions or comments or want to be part of what we're talking about, post it below and be part of it. Just to warn you, there's about a minute delay between when you post and when we get to see it. So don't worry about that. We'd love to have you part of the video, part of the conversation tonight. So, yeah, welcome. Man, it has been a nuts week, a little bit. Like everything is opening up, and yet everything is still shut down. It's kind of a weird place to be. I don't know. Well, I don't know what you've noticed, man.
Well, we were saying the other night, because we were going to go out for like a picnic. What was that, Sunday night, I think? We were going to go out for like a little picnic in the park or whatever. And so for those that aren't in the Boise Treasure Valley area, we pull out onto State Street. And south of State Street is Garden City.
Yep.
North of State Street is Boise. Boise still has restrictions. Can't eat in the restaurant. Garden City does not have that restriction. So we drive by Applebee's and we're like, look at all those people in Applebee's. What the heck? How come they're eating in the restaurant? It's because it's Garden City, different restrictions. So literally right across the street from us is different rules and regulations and all that stuff.
So I had to run to Staples for a couple different things. And there's a Staples in Eagle, in Meridian, and there's a Staples in Boise, and they're about the same distance from here. And so I went to the one in Eagle, or in Meridian, and it's like, the employees are wearing masks, and they've got the, I always want to call them the blast shields, the sneeze shields, right?
Yeah, across the
plexiglass thing, right? And that's about it. About half the people are wearing masks in the store as far as customers, but not a lot of social distancing. People are kind of, being somewhat conscientious, but there's not a lot to it. I had to run for something else, and I happened to be down by the one in Boise, so I stop in there, and it's a whole different world. Every single person going in has a mask on. They've got like it roped off, and you can only walk one direction going through the store, and then you go to check out, and you take your package and you set it on a table. And the cashiers are like 8 feet away from you on the other side of a sneeze shield going this way. And they grab your stuff and they scan it. And then you walk around a corner, and go to a different table and scan your card and sign all the stuff. And then they slide it under a different shield, right? And then they immediately sanitize everything you touched. And it was just a different world between going to Staples in Meridian and a Staples in Boise. It was just, man. I don't know. I don't know if anyone else has noticed what life has been like as we've opened up.
We ended up going to Red Robin, just takeout, right?
Yeah.
And down by the mall. And the Red Robin down there, it was like, we called our order in, pulled up the parking lot, sat there for a few minutes. There was only a couple cars. Well, apparently the other Red Robin, which I think is in Meridian, Meridian also has different, as you just pointed out, different restrictions. People could eat in at Red Robin over there. So we're like, makes sense why we were able to just pull right up, get our food, and there was no wait, So, it's weird around here right now.
Could you hit 1 real quick? Just hit the button 1. Oh, click over here on this screen. This got funny over here. There you go.
It's like infinity screen.
It's infinity screen, and then hit 1.
Seriously?
Yep, on the keyboard. Oh, it didn't do it. Oh, sorry, guys, everybody. I don't know what happened, but it's going to be a pain to fix. So hit 2. There we go. That'll work. Okay. Sorry, everybody. Our preview monitor was like infinity screening, which was a little annoying.
Kind of like that. Yeah. Similar.
Oh, man. So Kellen and I have been talking about that all kind of goes back to just some of the anxiety that we've been seeing and even personally been feeling as dads, as husbands, as pastors, being part of the community here. It feel like we know there's just increased sense of anxiety, and even with we're now in phase 2, right? We're in this phase 2 step of the plan that almost kind of increases anxiety a little bit, because all of a sudden it's like, for the first time in 2 months, we're interacting with people again, and it feels weird, man. It's almost awkward.
Yeah. I had to take the kids to Target to get Mother's Day gifts.
Yes.
Right? And you warned me.
I did warn you.
Hey, you're going to see some people in there with face masks. You're going to see other people in there without face masks, and nobody's social distancing. And that's exactly what happened. And it was weird because, like, Kathy's mainly been our shopper during this whole thing. You know, she'll run to Walmart or Winco or whatever for groceries, Albertsons and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And I've basically just gone to BioLife.
Yeah.
You know, to donate plasma, or here for our podcast. So to actually like go into a store, and it was because like kids don't get any of this, you know? So Ariel, who was like super pumped just to see other human beings besides her brother and sister, is going up to everybody, completely ignoring any distancing rules and going up to him and be like, you want to be my friend? Can we be friends? What's your daughter's name? What's your son's name? What's your name? Who are you? Where are you going? What are you buying? Like, holy cow, girl, just leave him alone. And I'm like, hey, give him, I'm trying to like, hey, give him some distancing, give him some space. And she's like, but I want to be their friend. I want to do. Oh, man. And then like the picnic night when we got Red Robin, she was running right up to people who had dogs and kids, and oh man, it created a different level of anxiety. I mean, we're like, when we first moved out here, I'm like, talk to everybody you want to talk to whoever, I don't care. So yeah, it created a different type of anxiety that I've probably experienced, because you don't know, like, I'm fine. I was fine with it. Like, whatever, she doesn't get out much right now, so when she got out, it was a big deal. But you don't know how they're reacting to it. These other people that she's going up to.
Yep.
And I really don't want them to, like, you hear those stories on the news where people freak out.
Yeah. People, it's almost like cornered animal syndrome, whatever you would call that, where people are very fight or flight driven right now.
I don't remember what state it was in, but there was like a Walmart where a guy was breaking social distancing rules, and someone shot him or something like that.
Well, that, like, in New York, people will like chant at you. It's like a little public shaming almost.
There's videos where they, like when in New York, where they would, there's people breaking those rules, and
you just never know.
They're like cussing them out from their apartment.
You never know what someone's reaction is going to be right now.
That's why
it's a little volatile.
I was like with Ariel at Target and at the park the other day. I was just like, man. And when I'm saying park, is like big open area. It's like green grass everywhere. There's not like playground equipment. It's more just like a.
And the playgrounds in Boise are still shut down, right?
But you go over to Meridian and
they're open.
They're open.
And if you don't know, we live like on the corner where Garden City, Boise, and Eagle, and then Meridian's just a little further away, but kind of where they all meet here in Northwest Boise. So we get to see a lot of that dynamic.
Yeah. But yeah, my anxiety was like, how are they going to react more so than what she was doing, so.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. It is, that I've noticed that with kids, with some of the pastors' conversation I see on Facebook and social media, and there's a couple private pastors groups I'm part of where people just kind of talk ministry and things that they're working through. And one of the big questions is kids ministry. Like, how in the world are you supposed to do kids ministry while you're still supposed to do social distancing? And, no one, everyone's like, how do you do it? How do you do it? And the answer is you don't.
Yeah.
Right. Unless you've got like plexiglass cubicles to put your kids in. And who wants to do that? Your options are either, if you're a family, stay at home and watch online, or have your kids sit with you. Or if your church decides to do kids ministry, then you're just like, it's going to be what kids ministry is. It's going to be kids, drooling on each other and running around and tackling each other. And because they like our kids are in there hanging out right now, and they can't stay,
Oh man. Yeah.
we can't keep them away from each other. And so then we're just like, well, I guess our kids are going to hang out and not see anybody else, because
basically
that's not what you can do.
Yeah.
Let alone the dog, man. Our dog can't handle it. But it does make me realize that anxiety that we feel, like you said, our kids don't necessarily know what's going on, but it doesn't mean our kids aren't dealing with anxiety. I think that they definitely get a lot of sense that even though they may not understand exactly what's going on, and like our oldest, Liam, turned 9 and he's a 3rd grader, and he gets it. Like, he kind of gets what's happening. I don't think he understands exactly how unique of a situation this is. But there's a sense where he's like, okay, I get why we're doing what we're doing. But I think any anxiety we see from our kids is a lot of times a reflection of the anxiety that we are bringing into the home. And because we can be, I know I can be anxious sometimes, and my wife is nodding at me. Yes, you can be. And so that can be a hard thing to recognize. That can be a hard thing to see. I don't know. I noticed that when I'm feeling more anxious, my kids are they have more behavioral issues. They don't listen as well. They forget guidelines or house rules more easily, and it's not like they're intentionally trying to exacerbate the situation. It's just there's a nervous energy and anxious energy that they just feed off of.
Right.
And there's times that Eric and I will have to look at each other and go, you need to take a time out. And we'll be like, "Arr, arr." It's like, no, you need to not be somewhere where you're around the rest of the family, because you are derailing everybody else.
Yep.
Right. So go take a time out. Right.
I don't know if y'all can hear it. There's a dog out here barking.
Okay, so one of our neighbors is a dog trainer, and I think she's got a dog that she's trying to work with right now on the barking. But every time he goes out and
it wasn't the lawnmower. It's raining. It's been raining the last 2 days here.
Like 3 days straight has been raining, so no lawnmower noise tonight. But the dogs are out. But hey, since we got a break, if anyone is dealing with anxiety or has noticed anxious behavior, let us know. Let us know what you've seen or what you've been dealing with. But we'd love to hear that and make it part of the conversation. But what have you noticed, Kellen? I mean, even in your own house, or?
Yeah, I actually. So how our house is set up, because both my wife and I are working from home right now. I'm in the kitchen. She's upstairs in our bedroom, and yesterday the kids. It seems like at least one day each week, they, for 8 hours, go toe to toe, and yesterday was the day, apparently this week. And today they were great. Today was a good day. No problems with the kids today. But yesterday, oh man, they were fighting all day long. And finally, I think it was like, I don't know, 2 or 3 o'clock or something like that in the afternoon. And I finally lost it, and I was yelling at them because they were just supposed to go out for recess, right? Yeah. They go out for recess, and they were fighting just before they went outside. And so I yell at him, and I get a text from my wife. She's like, what's going on down there? Why are you yelling? I can hear you over, the door's closed. I'm on the phone, and I can hear you yelling. And I have an outdoor voice. I used to be a baseball coach. Yeah. I know how to yell. Carries. I know how to yell and make it carry. And so anyway, they go outside and they play.
Do you have that problem where your wife just looks at you and say, you talk so loud?
There's times.
Yeah, I get that.
There's times.
I get that a couple times a week.
Yeah, there's times. And there's been times where I've gone to preach in not a traditional church setting, you know, so you don't have the sound system and the microphones.
Yeah.
And someone's like, do you need a mic? I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm fine.
Yeah,
I don't need a mic.
I used to do youth ministry for like 100 teenagers.
Yeah.
Fine.
Like you can get over them, right? But anyway, so the kids go outside to play, and Faith wanted to ride her bike, and there's like this sidewalk square around our, I don't know what you want to call it. It's not, there's a playground, but then there's like this grassy
like
area.
A green courtyard area.
Yeah, it's like a courtyard. Yeah, good way to put it. So anyway, Faith likes to do that, and then Noah will watch, you know, make sure she's okay. For some stupid reason, they decided to play tag. She's on her bike. Noah's on foot. They decide to play tag. Well, he went to like mine because I heard 4 different stories from 2 kids, so I don't know which story is the truth. But
that's my favorite.
She like, I don't know if she went to tag him or he went to tag her as she rode by, and she hit her brakes. Her foot slipped off the pedal, got stuck in the spokes of her bike, and apparently it launched her.
Oh no!
Right, but when she comes in the house, self-preservation kicks in. And she's like, Noah did it all. Noah knocked me off my bike. He shoved me down. And then my bike flipped on me. And so here I am trying to work. And I'm thinking, I got a 14-year-old kid who's beating up his 7-year-old sister, you know?
Yeah.
And so he came in and I start yelling again. And Kathy's like, what are you doing? What's all the yelling? Why is Faith up here crying? What's going on? And then a couple minutes later, I get another text from her. And she's like, so Faith fessed up. You know, Faith said it was her idea. She needs to tell you the truth because you're yelling at Noah, and now she feels bad that you're yelling at Noah, right? So she comes downstairs.
You just punish kids until someone messes up.
So someone
wall
comes
squats, everybody now.
So Faith comes down to the kitchen, and I'm like, "What's going on? Tell me the truth. What happened?" Right? So she comes out with it, and I'm like, "Okay, well, why didn't you just tell me that from the get-go? I'm not mad at you. I mean, you two obviously know now. Don't play tag on your bikes.
Yeah.
I mean, I got a scar. I got a scar on my hand that you can't see, but it's from playing tag on my bike as a kid. So I was that dumb too.
We used to joust.
Yes. I know exactly what you're talking about. Our tag was you had to ram the other person with your bike.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't hit them with your hand. You had to ram them.
You had to take out the tire with your bike.
Yes. So that's how I got this scar. I had a handlebar get jammed into my hand, you know. Anyway, so Faith is telling me, I'm bringing this around to the anxiety. Right?
Okay,
I promise. This isn't just me screwing up as a parent. So Faith, I'm like, all right, why didn't you just tell me the truth from the beginning, you know? And all of a sudden she starts crying, and I'm like, oh man, what's going on? What's happening, you know? And she's like, and this is the first time in the 2 months they've been home, this is the first time she's fessed up. Or not really fessed up, that she admitted she's missed her friends from school.
Okay, yeah.
You know, Ariel from like day 2 was like, I miss my friends. You know, Noah's got Xbox, so he has some communication with his friends. He plays Xbox Live, and so he's got some communication with his friends and whatnot. But Faith, this was the first time in 2 months where she's like, I miss my friends. You know, and I mean, that isn't why she necessarily didn't come out with the truth right away, but there's that underlying anxiety there.
There's something else going on.
Right.
We had that. I had that same thing with Liam today. He had, it was today. He had a phone call with his class today, and then he's got his last video call with his class is Friday.
Okay.
Right, and so he ends the video call, and I go, how was that? And he goes, it was good. And then he goes, Friday's my last video call with the class.
Yeah.
And he kind of had that real sad look. And I said, is that kind of sad to you? Is that, yeah, I'm really sad about it. And it was just this, I think it kind of set in that he's not seeing his classmates before the end of the year, right? This is kind of it. I mean, and there's that thing that we've all been dealing with as adults, and we've understood cognitively and emotionally, we've been figuring out how to deal with it. And all of a sudden, now that we're getting to this transition that our kids are kind of used to of going from school year to summer, all of a sudden there's like, oh, I'm not going to get to say goodbye. You know, and even though we've got kids, you know, I mean, you've got a middle schooler, but we've also got early elementary kids. They're now going, man, I'm just now realizing I don't get to have that goodbye before summer. I don't get to have that kind of bittersweet excitement of we don't get to see each other every day, but it's summer, right? You know,
Right.
that's
They don't
gone.
get to say
It's
goodbye
just-
to the teacher and all that stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
And I love our teachers. Our teachers are trying to make it incredibly intentional. You know, our kindergarten teacher is fantastic, and she's doing like this whole campfire thing with the kids tomorrow, and dropped off little goodie bags, and I think there's like a s'more in there and all kinds of good stuff.
Yeah.
But you know, teachers are knocking it out of the park for us and trying to be intentional and make it special. But you can't replace the community and the relationship that our kids are used to having. And so walking through that with our kids has been, I mean, it's been a very real thing. And there's times when I have to step back and go, okay, are you acting like this because you're locked up inside, or because there is anxiety and just an emotional thing that you're dealing with that maybe you're not even aware of? Mm-hmm. Like our kindergartner has been off the walls this week, right? And so some of that has been because it's been raining out for the last 3 or 4 days, and he hasn't been able to go out and ride his bike, and so he's got a ton of energy, and he's 6. But I think there's a very real sense where he just doesn't have that connection with other kids other than his brother to just go out and be an extrovert.
Right. Well, that was like,
Yeah.
you know, we were both talking actually just before this all started. We both happened to listen to the same podcast
Yes.
in the last few days.
Yeah.
The same two guys talking about anxiety. And that was before, or I think I found the podcast right about the time you texted me, say, hey man, we're going to talk about anxiety today. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Because I'm about to listen to a podcast about it. And I took away a ton of things from that podcast, by the way. It was with Carrie Newhoff and was it Sean Cuss? Was that his name?
Yep, Sean Cuss. Yep. He's got a new book out, which I think I'm actually going to buy for the staff and have us go through it together, because it is, just from the interview, it is phenomenal material.
It was great. Like I'm just starting to get into podcasts. I'm late. I'm really late to that game. But you know, sitting at home and you know.
On that note, I remember when we first were getting connected, and starting to talk ministry, you know, like a little over a year ago, I would start ranting about these, not ranting, but like all these podcasts I like listening to.
Oh, yeah.
And you'd be like, yeah, I mean, that's cool. And I'd like try to share clips with you, and you're like, well, okay. And
we're going down the rabbit hole here real quick. When we were coming back from, was it Billings?
Yeah, I was back from Billings.
And we were listening to a podcast, I passed out.
I know.
I was done.
And I was like, I was thinking, because we had decided, okay, we're doing ministry together. I'm like, I'm going to play a leadership podcast.
Yeah.
And I had already listened to it.
You're
and
like,
I didn't
this
tell
is
you that.
phenomenal.
Like, this is a really good one. And let's listen to this. And I put it on. Within like 15 minutes, you were out.
I was probably snoring, wasn't I?
Yeah. And I was just like, I'm like, oh.
I was like,
trying not to judge you.
it's true. I was done. It was a Carrie Newhoff one, if I remember right.
It was Carrie Newhoff, yeah.
Which, I mean, I like Carrie Newhoff. I read a lot of his stuff.
His stuff is good, but yeah, I mean, they are long podcasts.
They are, yeah. So I sent it to my wife. I'm like, yeah, you got to listen to this. And I got my response to you. She's like, well, how long is it? I'm like,
I know.
I'm like an hour and a half. She's
Erica
like,
doesn't know this, but I'm going to send it to her too.
She's like, I don't have that kind of time. But anyway, so
my wife only listens to true crime podcasts, so I
man.
can't get her to listen to leadership stuff.
it's funny. But so anyway, Sean Cuss, though, he had said there's two types of anxiety, right? And it, you know, you bringing this up with our kids made me think of it. The one that he says is acute anxiety. He says this is a very real threat. For example, you find out a loved one, say like a spouse, right, has a terminal illness. Now, you know, maybe what the kids are going through isn't necessarily a terminal illness, but it's something that is very real. It's a very real threat. Like, I may never see my friends again because next year classes may be different. The kids could move, you know, whatever, a number of different things could happen. Right. So, you know, I think what they're going through is, you know, that very real threat, that very real possibility that, oh, this is done. And I didn't know this was done. And, you know, I remember, yesterday when I was, you know, after I had my, my freak out session, I brought the kids back into the kitchen and I calmly told them, like, look, we can't go through the whole summer fighting, right? Like, we can't do that. That's not doable. It's not sustainable. I was like, I realize this pandemic is horrible. For you guys, you're cooped up with the same 3 kids all the time. I said, but you've got a 5-month summer, and the good news is that I was able to share with them. Good news is our apartment complex is going to open their pool and hot tub for the summer, as well as the indoor play area, as long as it's like. I think the indoor play area, Kathy, was it like only one family can be in there at a time. And then the pool area, it's like 25 people or less, and you're limited on how long you can be in there. So at least they've got something to do to get out of the house, I guess, to look forward to. So I gave them that, but, we'll see. But anyway, yeah.
But you're saying acute anxiety, and then what was the other kind of...
the other one he said was grief. Which is related to anxiety, but it's a completely different thing, right? So he said those are 2 legitimate sources of anxiety. Some of the other stuff that he was saying, like, like the anxiety that we experience, and I don't know if I got this written down. Dude, I was like, because I had some slow moments at work, so I'm listening to this podcast, and I'm just like frantically tapping away on my phone. I know. I was going to ask you this. So at one point, he says, anxiety usually shows up in a spinning mind,
yes,
a racing heart, or a tightening body.
Yeah.
But it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind sharing,
I will. So let's talk about what this is a little bit. Like, there is a piece of self-awareness when it comes to anxiety that is incredibly powerful, because a lot of times we don't even realize that we are anxious. Like everyone around us that we work with, or our family, the people we're close to, know that we're anxious. Like, I'm sure that there's times that you, or for sure Erica, know that I'm anxious, or I'm stressed out, or however you want to call it, and I haven't even recognized it yet. And there is something powerful about being able to name it.
Right.
It's kind of that, like, if you're going to name and claim anything, name and claim your anxiety, right?
Yeah.
Like, know your emotional state, and being able to go, okay, I'm anxious. And maybe even the next level is then to go, and this is probably why, like, what's the undercurrent? Like, what's the reason? And there's a whole conversation about that, that they go into. It's a powerful podcast if you haven't listened to it. But he says, okay, the body reacts right in 3 different ways to anxiety, and everyone has a different way. And these are ways that we can kind of take our own temperature, so to speak. And one is the spinning mind.
Yeah, spinning mind.
That's that, like, you can't shut your brain off.
Yep.
And then the
racing heart,
which is like you got an adrenaline shot, right? And you're just heart's going. And then tightening body, which is like, I need a back rub, I need a massage, like you're tense, right? So I'm a spinning mind.
Yeah, I knew that.
Yeah.
I didn't know if everybody else did.
I am a spinning mind, absolutely. When I get anxious, my brain will sit there and contemplate the same thing over and over and over again. And when it's bad, it feels like a feedback loop. Because every time you go through it, it gets worse and worse and intensifies to the point where I can't sleep at night. So I have a couple things that I do, and they're purely coping. They're not dealing with the anxiety. That's a whole different kind of thing. But like, I have a fan, and it's the same. I've had the same fan since Erica and I got married, because it used to be her fan and I stole it. And I have fixed that fan about 15 times so that it stays running, because no other fan sounds like it. And there's something about the white noise that fan creates. I just kind of like, that's just where my brain focuses on that, and it latches onto it. The second thing I do is I'll take melatonin. If I know, and this is part of like being able to realize my brain is spinning. And so it'll get to about 10:30 and I'll go, I'm not gonna be able to sleep tonight. And so I'll take, 3 to 5 milligrams of melatonin, and then I'll be out by 11:30. But if I don't, I'll be up till 3 or 4. How about I don't know this about you. I don't know what yours would be.
Mine, I've really only realized it probably in the last couple of years. And honestly, I'd never really Well, I take that back. Prior, it probably would have been, in hindsight, like when we were first married, early in our marriage, it probably was a spinning mind. Because I would, like, there'd be days where I'd go without sleep. There was a couple of times I did that where I went 24, 48 hours without sleep, you know. But I would say the last couple of years, when it's manifested, when anxiety has manifested itself in me, it's been a racing heart. Like the first time it happened was maybe a little over a year ago now, year and a half ago or so, maybe 2 years. And I remember pulling up to work, and I sent Kathy a text. I'm like, I feel like I'm gonna have a heart attack. I don't know what's going on right now. What's happening? I'm like struggling to breathe. My heart feels like it's jumping out of my chest. Like, what do I do? You know, and my dad. So where I was like freaking out, I was like, my dad had multiple heart attacks, right?
Oh yeah.
And some of them were big ones, right? So I'm like, is this a heart attack? Is this what I need to prepare the rest of my life for? You know? Man. But it was one of those things where I ended up driving down to a coffee shop, which not a good idea to have coffee when your heart's popping.
Palpitations, caffeine.
But I went to a coffee shop and brought a book with me that I had already in my backpack, and just instead of doing my work, which sounds like the wrong thing to do, because I think the reason I was having an anxiety attack was the amount of work I was trying to do, was I put off the work and just like took a couple hours just to read for enjoyment. You know what I mean?
That's so powerful, man.
And it was, you know, it was time to, you know, I'm sitting in the coffee shop reading and praying. And I mean, I wasn't like pounding the coffee, right? But, you know, I always feel bad going to a coffee shop and not buying something.
No, it's the cover charge, right?
Yeah,
That's the price of entry. You got to buy the coffee. See, but the agreement is if you buy the coffee, you get to sit there as long as you want.
Right. I'm sipping it. But anyway, yeah. So that's how it kind of manifests in me now is that racing heart. And it's, yeah, I don't know when it's going to happen, right? Also, like, the times that it's happened to me has been just like, I didn't see it coming, you know? Now, maybe my wife, she's in here too, but maybe my wife would be like, I saw it coming. You know, I knew you were doing this to yourself, and, you know, tried to give you the red flag warning signs, but you weren't listening to me. You know, I'm sure she probably knows, just as Erica probably knows before it starts happening to you. So, yeah.
Heather commented that procrastination is where she'll see her I'm guessing that's where you'll see your anxiety. And I'm with you there. And I think that ties in with the spinning mind too, is when my brain is going and going and going, it almost, you can't act on it. And so then you procrastinate, and then it's just the stress of it having to be done is the only thing that kind of knocks you into gear. Right. Because otherwise it's almost like a revving engine in neutral.
Yeah.
Right.
So your wife's a 9 on the Enneagram. Yep. I'm a 9 on the Enneagram. Heather, I don't know what you are on the Enneagram, but if you're a 9, or if you know what you are in the Enneagram, comment, because I'm curious. Because as a 9, we are notorious procrastinators, right? Right, Erica? We're notorious for it. So knowing that, though, after reading more about the Enneagram, Kathy and I laughed at it when we were listening to it on Audible, because 9s will like, I know this big project is looming, right? Yeah. I know it's looming. It's creating anxiety in me, knowing that it's looming, but the thought of actually addressing it creates more anxiety, right? So I now that I know this about my personality, it's different. I can see it a lot easier when I'm putting off things, right? Yeah. But
Heather's a 9.
You're a 9, Heather?
Heather says she's a 9.
See? It makes so much sense. But yeah, so it makes so much sense. But
Heather wants to know how she gets a new number. Sorry. It's someone innate. Good luck. There's nothing wrong with being a 9. I mean, they're not as good at 3s, but
I think 9s are great, Heather. We're amazing. So we're the peacemakers, man. That's all good. But it did. I mean, you know, I look back on that season, and it, you know, I didn't know it at the time when that first anxiety attack happened. But I had some big projects that were going on. Some of them weren't going the way that when I'm saying we, some of the staff that I worked with on them, they weren't going the way that I expected or the way that I had hoped. And And that only made more anxiety, it created more anxiety in me. And going back to that podcast that we listened to.
David, I love that you're a 3. That does not surprise me at all. But yes, we need to form a club. We can all self-congratulate each other. And tell each other how well we're doing.
Maybe one of these days we should just talk about
Enneagram stuff, man. Let's do it. Let's do it. If you haven't done Enneagram, just look it up. There's a lot of tests out there. Some of them are paid, some of them are free, but it's awesome. Pick up the book. What's the book we read?
Road Back to You.
Road Back to You. Oh, such a powerful book. I haven't had a book make me cry in a long time. That one did.
Yeah. Well, and we love it too, because so our roommate, because you're not supposed to call out numbers in people.
No, you're not. You're not supposed to name them. They have to name it.
Heather, knowing you're a 9 did not surprise me, but you're not supposed to call out numbers. That's why I asked if you knew. But so our roommate Kayla, Kathy and I were kind of like, I think she's a 5. And then we were reading about the 5 and we're like, pretty sure she's a 5. And then she took the test, because one night we were talking about it. We're like, have you ever done the Enneagram? She's like, no. She does the test and she's like, I'm like borderline 5-6. We're like, yeah, but you're not supposed to call it out because it's not a negative thing. 5s are great. But there was a quote that I wrote down from that podcast. It says, anxiety starts when we believe the lie that it's all on me.
Oh.
And especially as pastors, we love to be superheroes, man.
What's that hero mentality? We talked about that a couple, was that last week?
With your dad, the hero,
2 weeks ago.
Bully, and the
hero, bully, and victim, the drama triangle. And pastors love to be the hero.
We love to be the hero. Oh. Yep. We don't like to be the bully. I mean, some of us are, but we don't like to be the bully. Well, we like to be the hero. So I'm like, oh, dang. Yes, that's totally me. Like when I believe, here, I'll give you a good example. I know I'm supposed to preach, right? Mm-hmm. I don't like preaching.
We've talked a little bit about this.
We've talked a little bit about this. But part of that is I get stuck in this, when I'm writing a sermon, I get stuck in this mindset that the sermon, the content, the delivery, the effect, all of that is on me, right? Mm-hmm. Is that true? No, that's not true at all, right? None of that is true.
But we tell ourselves that.
Exactly. Now let's take it away from even the pastors, right? We'll pick on the 2 ladies in the room, right?
Since you can't see them, and
we can't see them, they're giving me looks right now. Oh, we're waiting. They're like,
be careful. We each have to.
This isn't bad, I promise. This isn't bad, I promise. But let's say our wives need to talk to somebody at work about Christ, right?
Yeah.
They think, right? I don't want to put words in your mouths, ladies, because you're not alone. They think it's all on them, the people in our church.
We hear that all the time.
When they got to share Christ with somebody, they think it's all on them. Is that true?
No.
Because that creates anxiety to share Christ, right? It's the same concept as preaching. For me, anyway. Some people are like, I love preaching. Let me preach all day long.
I love preaching. I love being on a stage, right? I was a theater kid. I was a musician. I love being on a stage. I love being in, the bigger the crowd, the easier it is for me to be on, right?
Okay.
But they're all, right my now? Wife's the faces she's making right now. She's like, ego. No, but there is a sense of, I feel like if it is not the best sermon, that I've somehow failed. Right. If it's not phenomenal content, if I don't have that tweetable line, if people aren't posting on social about how much the sermon impacted them, then somehow I've failed. Right. You can feel that way. You can be driven by it. Mm-hmm. And that's really common for pastors, whether you like preaching or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and so gosh, this podcast was so great. Sean Cuss goes on to say, God is already at work in the ambiguity that I am walking into.
Yes.
That's such
He's
a good
there
line.
Before you were there.
He's there before I'm even writing the sermon. Mm-hmm. Right? He's there in their lives before they even hear the sermon. He's there in their lives before our wives even share Christ at work or whoever, right? So he's already working in that ambiguity before we get there, but we think he doesn't show up until we do.
And that's such a powerful thing when you think about anxiety, both for our anxiety, but when you know that you're going to walk into a situation that is full of anxiety. If I know if my kids are having a tough day and I'm going to walk into the room with them, or if I know my wife has been stressed and I'm going to walk into a room with her, or I know that I'm going to go into a pastoral counseling moment and it is a tough conversation, and I'm going to go walk into that situation. And I think it's all on me. I've got to have the right words. I've got to have the right scripture. I've got to have the right bit of advice. And that's none of that is true, because God was there in that room before I ever stepped into that. God was in the midst of this podcast before you or I ever stepped foot in this garage.
Yeah.
Right. Same with a Sunday morning. Same with a work situation. Same with whatever it is. God was there already working. What's that? We just talked about it with Romans chapter 8. God was there doing work, for your good ahead of you, right? I'm butchering it right now. That is the crappiest paraphrase of Romans 8:28 or whatever, 8:23 that I've ever heard. But we see that in Romans, we see that in 2 Corinthians, right? Like God has prepared good works in advance for you to do, right? You are God's masterpiece. That's
the Ephesians 2.
We see that all throughout Scripture, and yet we forget. We think it's all on us all the time, and that is that is tough.
Yeah,
it's a tough thing to carry that, because we tell ourselves that we all can have these narratives, right? Either that I've got to have the answers, or I've got to carry the moment, or it's all on me, or it could go the other way too, of I have nothing good to add to this. I have nothing to contribute. And we tell ourselves these things all the time, and they fill us with anxiety. And it's all these lies and these pressures that we put on ourselves that honestly, that's just our own stuff that we have got to figure out how to work through and deal with.
Well, a lot of that's like what I hear too, kind of like what we're talking about. Like when I talk to somebody about getting into discipleship with another person, right? I could never disciple anybody. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know. I didn't go to seminary. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. Right? They have all this anxiety because they think it depends all on them. They believe the lie that the success of the discipleship relationship is all on them. When in reality, God's already been working in that other person's life and in their life well before that discipleship relationship ever began. Right? Like, yeah, it's just, there's just so much anxiety with that, thinking that, or believing that lie, that it's dependent upon us. And, one thing I was thinking about today too, like listening to that podcast, is he was talking too about, sometimes what it does for people is it drives us to try harder.
Yeah.
Than what
to produce more.
Right.
Yeah.
And he said a lot of the problem with churches going through the coronavirus stuff is they've taken on more and more, I don't know if I want to say content. I'm trying to say, like, they're trying to do more and more than they ever were before. Yeah.
Well, because now all of a sudden you've got to put out more content every week. Yep. And you've got to make more phone calls.
You got to do more videos.
You've ramped everything up.
Right. So, I mean, part of it, I was thinking about the church plan. I was like, are we trying harder, by doing more? Are we are we becoming more reliant on what God was already doing before we even got to May 20th, before we even get to June 1st and so on. Right. I mean, we've had to kind of rethink what we were doing. I mean, the benefit of where we were at a church plant when this all happened is like, we were just starting to get to the point where we were going to ramp up things. Right. But we've just had to rethink what we were doing. Not necessarily, I don't know if we're necessarily trying harder. Maybe we are. I don't know.
I was thinking, Eric and I were talking about that yesterday. I was looking at my schedule this week and just the amount of content creation trying to come up with. Like, it's like, okay, we got a podcast on Wednesday, and then Saturday morning we've got Bible study, and then on Sunday we've got team gathering, and I'm trying to do more preaching and teaching during the team gathering now. And then we're doing these short videos, right? Like whether it's a Love Local video or like a 2 to 5 minute just kind of spiritual reinforcement. We haven't even really decided what kind, but that feel of like, it's almost like a devotional, but not quite. And all of that I mean, that's a lot of content to put out, and I was super stressed about it yesterday. I was freaking out, and Erica's like, "You better get it under control because tomorrow is your son's birthday, and you need to be present for that." And I'm like, "Okay, my goodness." Like usually she's like, "It'll be okay, you know, just find a moment." She's like, "No, get it in gear." Right. But that's a lot of pressure that we could put on ourselves to come up with things. And I think a powerful question with that was, why are you creating it?
Yeah.
Are you creating it just because you need to you feel the need to be productive?
Yeah.
Right. Which we should be productive. We've been created to be productive, and being church planner has that entrepreneurial side where you want to be productive, and that's good. But why? Mm-hmm. Why are you being productive? Why are you doing this thing that you're doing? Mm-hmm. Is it because you feel like you need to make more of a presence, or is it because you're creating content that the people that are going to see it, that are part of your sphere of influence, are you creating content that is actually going to be beneficial for them? Mm-hmm. Right. And that's even with this podcast, it's really hard to not just get into this mindset of, okay, we need to script the whole thing out. We need to know exactly what we're going to talk about and what's going to be that walk away, you know, that take home application point at the end of it. And we had kind of made the commitment from the very beginning that we wanted this to be a conversation where we didn't necessarily know where the end was going to be. Yeah. Like we might know the leading questions on the front, but that was as much prep as we were putting into it. And it wasn't because we wanted to be lazy, but it was because... I was
just thinking, like, I wonder if people can tell how much prep work we put into this conversation.
But we wanted it to be authentic.
Yeah.
We wanted it to be organic. And it kind of came like we used to just sit over coffee or honestly sit in the hot tub some nights back before they shut that down. Yeah. And we would just have these long conversations. And we're like, I wonder if other people would want to be part of this conversation.
Right.
And so we just come to the table with some things that we want to talk about either together with other people. But it is so tempting to go, oh, I need to script the whole thing out so that it's powerful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that just creates a bunch of work for you, which adds more anxiety and more stress. And it's like, do we need to do that?
Yeah. Lonnie asked me last week before we interviewed him, and he was like, do you get anxiety for this? And I was like, actually, no, because it's just talking. You know, there's not a lot of, I mean, it's not that there's no prep work. Like you said, we try to think of some questions ahead of time.
You got
maybe
notes,
the topic.
man. I'm like, dude, you got notes and quotes there.
That podcast, man, was so good. Like at first, like the first 40 minutes, because I was working, you know. Yeah. So the first 40 minutes, I wrote nothing down.
Well, he was talking a lot about personal experience.
And he was.
It was. I mean, it was good stuff, but it's like,
yeah. And then finally, I was like, oh man, that's really good. I got to rewind this. And so what was like an hour and a half podcast took me like 3 hours to listen to, because I'd rewind it. I'd tap out the quote, you know? But yeah, it was super good. It was one of the better podcasts I've listened to, I think. But
you know, so let's talk about dealing with anxiety, right? Like if you're able to identify it, and then you're able to go, okay, so maybe anxiety is coming from some of the questions that I'm telling myself, right? The things that I am expecting of myself that maybe aren't real. How do we begin to mitigate that? Because I can still have a lot of anxiety. Like there's a difference between getting rid of anxiety and be like, I'm never anxious ever. I think that's an unrealistic expectation. But I think being able to identify it and then know what helps us navigate it is where the power is, right? So going, okay, what's my body's response, right? And it's interesting. So I'm very much the spinning mind right now. But I used to be spinning mind and tightening body, right? Like I would have massive knots in my shoulders to the point where like my shoulder blades were flexed up, right? And I couldn't get my shoulders to go back all the way. And it was really bad. And we did some counseling and worked through some things. Yeah. And I'm spinning mind is still there. That's I think some of that's just part of my wiring, but I don't carry it in my body as much. I don't carry it in my back. You know, I don't have this constant pain all the time anymore. But some of that has been figuring out things that rejuvenate us, that refreshen us. You know, you were talking about just, going and getting coffee and just reading for enjoyment's sake. And we had talked. Oh, you and I do one-on-ones every week, and I think it was last time we were talking about just devotional life, and I was telling you how I was having a struggle of not pulling teaching notes into my devotional life, right? Like I wasn't doing scripture and time with God just for scripture and time with God. I was doing it, and it would always turn into teaching prep.
Right.
So in your life, what are some of the things that you found that you do just for enjoyment, for like that it's life-giving to you?
Yeah. Like I bought a bike a couple years ago from Paul Nix, rode it maybe 30 miles and then stopped using it. Right. It was a good bike too. It's a nice bike.
It is a nice bike. I like your bike.
So part of that was I was afraid to ride in Sioux Falls.
Okay.
Right?
It's not, Sioux Falls is not a bike community.
It's not a super bike friendly. I mean, it's getting better, but it used to scare me really bad. We moved to, when we moved to Boise, there's bike lanes everywhere. Right. And you see people on their bikes all the time. And that was one of the first things my wife and I noticed out here was like, hey, we actually got to be careful for people on bikes. So I started riding. Right. Sometimes it's just short, 5-7 miles, quick, half hour, knock it out.
Yeah.
Other times though, like, 10-15 miles, which is more like a 45-minute or so to an hour ballpark for me. Because I'm not out there trying to beat world records and anything like that. It's more just to put on some worship music and ride, enjoy the scenery. Sometimes I'll stop, take pictures, stuff like that. So for me, getting out on my bike is super helpful. As an introvert, really solitude time, right? So alone on my bike, or there's been times where Kathy's like, dude, you need to go to a coffee shop, get out of here, go get ice cream, get out of the house, go for a drive,
solitude can be powerful.
Oh man, that solitude time for me is huge as an introvert, especially like in this season, right? Some people are like, oh, introverts, this is what you've been waiting for. You get to just spend time at home all the time.
That is not introverting.
No.
I have kids.
3 kids, a roommate, my wife, there's not a lot of introverting time going on right now. So, my wife is good about that when she's recognizing that, and in those seasons where, like, in those moments where I can sense that I'm feeling more anxious, sense that I'm more on edge, getting those times to myself, or even if it's at home, making sure, I get up early to spend that time alone. And actually donating at BioLife is a huge help.
Yeah.
That hour we talked about
hour and a half of like no one can interrupt you.
Right? Can't interrupt you. You got to listen to music, read a book, whatever, watch a Netflix show.
You're hooked up to an IV. You're not going anywhere.
You're going nowhere. So that helps, just having that time just to myself, just to think and be on my own.
Aaron Mansell, pastor friend of ours, is saying, I remember when people told me that exercise is good for anxiety, and I thought that was dumb. And then I tried it and feel so much less anxious. I agree with you, man. That's one of the ways I'll do with anxiety is, and my wife will call it out. She's like, you need to go to the gym. Yeah. Right. Like I hate running.
How our wives call it out.
I know.
Like, hey, you're being a jerk.
Get out of my house.
Get out.
No. But I love doing elliptical and I love lifting. Yeah. Right. And so I'll go to the gym and spend like an hour and a half, like 45 minutes on the elliptical, 45 minutes lifting. And I'm a new man on the other side of that.
One of my favorite things to do was kickboxing. We used to go to a gym in Sioux Falls that was a lot of like that hit.
Was that the round 8 or?
There's 9 rounds. There's 9 rounds. I didn't go to that one. I went to Kosama.
Okay.
And Kosama, like each day of the week is a different routine, right? But they got it all mapped out for you. You don't have to do anything. You just show up. But kickboxing day, man, punching a bag, kicking a bag. Oh gosh, you get done with that after an hour, you're drenched in sweat and you're no longer angry.
I always wanted to get into boxing, like legit boxing, and fun. My wife was like, no. Don't. She's like, your face is pretty.
You just don't want to get hit. I mean, just
don't get hit in the face.
Just kickbox.
That's right.
Like, that way you don't get hit back.
No, some of the things I found for me, like activity is good, and that helps a ton, and it's sustainable, right? Mm-hmm. But creating things, I love to build things. I love to have little projects and make things in the shop, and Actually, right now I've been doing this model building, like a die cast model, and they send you another pack of parts every month. And I didn't realize how much that was helping with my just dealing with life and dealing with ministry and church planning and anxiety until I was supposed to have, like, the next box was supposed to get here on Monday, and it didn't get here until today. In the last 2 days, I've been like, where's my stuff? Right. Like, need my fix. Right. Yeah. Like, and so just creating something that doesn't have anything to do with church. Right. Because a lot of times I would build things for the church. You know, I'd build a set, or I'd build whatever. At Mitchell, I always had a build project going on for some ministry area out in the garage. And I would use that to just deal with stress. But having something where I can just create something is a huge outlet for me. And then, you know, getting out there, I haven't done the road biking as much. But mountain biking, I love mountain biking. It's
fun.
I love that downhill.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that downhill, man.
The downhill's so much fun.
And I have just the tiniest little knobs on my tires, like they're a hybrid commuter tire.
Yeah.
And so you do the downhill, and it's sketchy because that bike does not hang onto the trail at all.
Oh, man.
Hey, so I was trying to think of some other things that I do that's life-giving, but
is that, I mean, like, you know, we've talked about this before, like kind of where we feel it coming on. We realize there's that devotional time has been lacking.
Yeah.
So, and I realize we don't have a lot of time left. And if you guys have questions, feel free to drop them in the comments.
If what you do that's life-giving, post that. Like, I'd love to hear or see whatever that is. If you got a picture of it, post it in there too. That'd be awesome.
But what? And now my mind's going blank too. What's that book where it talks about like the different ways that we connect best with God?
Is that the celebration of discipline?
No, celebration of discipline is really good.
It talks about that.
This one was more like, do you find that you connect better with God or hear the voice of God better when you are in nature, or whether you're doing a piece of art, right? Some artwork. I can see the cover of the book because I had to read it for seminary, but for me, one of the things was getting back out into nature. Like if I ever feel like I'm not connecting for whatever reason, one of those things is to get out into nature. So whether it's to go hiking, or just, I used to, when we were back in South Dakota, I'd go to the Palisades and just sit. I'd bring my Bible and just sit by the river and just read my Bible, spend some time in prayer. Really though, those times reconnecting with God and remembering who He is and who I'm not, you know, has been the best way for me to reduce or remove my anxiety. I don't know about what I mean. I know you talked a little bit about, you know, creating things like building things or doing the die cast model, but
Well, I was thinking about how important it is to pour into yourself, right? Like we've been talking a lot about Love Local as a church and like serving, you know, we did this Love Moms, then we did like Love Your Neighbor, and now we're doing like your strangers are your neighbor too. Love a stranger in some way. And there's this pouring out with Love Local, like we're pouring out of ourselves, but you can't pour out of nothing. Right. If your well or your bucket or your cup or whatever analogy you want to use is empty, you've got nothing to pour out. You have to pour in. You have to take care of your and I think they talk about this in the podcast too. It's like that idea of when you're on a flight, they tell you to put on your oxygen mask before you help your kids or anyone around you. Right. You have to take care of yourself first. Yep. And this goes into that whole self-care thing of are you taking care of your health? You know, are you finding those things that are rejuvenating and making that a priority and making it part of your schedule? And it makes me think of even Jesus in the garden, right? So Jesus is about to be crucified. He knows what's coming. He's about to sacrifice himself for humanity and fully pour out of himself. And you go, well, there's nothing left. And he's Jesus. I mean, he's like 100% man, 100% God. Like, just go do it. But no, he takes a whole evening, and he just communes with the Father in the garden for a whole evening. Even Jesus fills his cup with God and fills his spirit first before he goes and fully empties it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just a power analogy where if Jesus is the ultimate role model for us. And even he always makes sure that he had those moments to fill himself up before he would go into these either situations where he would be anxious or situations where he was going to be walking into anxiety. You can see these small moments before that where he takes care of himself.
Well, and that's like, I mean, even when after he pours out, right? There's multiple times we see in scripture where he preaches to the multitudes and then he retreats to pray alone, right? Sometimes the crowds like go crazy and they try to find him, you know, but he retreats, he pours out, he retreats to be alone with the Father to refill his cup, bucket, whatever you want to say.
Well, and there's this sense like even when he found out that his cousin, John the Baptist, was killed, right? When he found out that his cousin had been beheaded, he went out to out on the water, I believe, and was just getting away from the crowds for a bit. And then the crowds found him.
Yeah.
And you can see there's almost this deep breath where the disciples are trying to protect that time. Right. And then he kind of like regroups and goes, okay, bring it in. Right. Like we've still got things to do. We've still got a mission and something that God has called us to do. But I took that moment. I've made the most of that time to rejuvenate and give life into my own life. But you don't just live in there. Like you turn right around and you pour out again. I think that that's a powerful way of dealing with anxiety in our life, is going, okay, so how do I fill myself up? And then how do I step into other people's anxiety, and how am I that presence that can help deal with that, you know? And it's not even about having the right words or having it all figured out, but just being able to read where people are at and speak into those situations or be there for people. I think is powerful. And I'm not a counselor, and I'm not well versed in all of this, but even in my own experience, there is something powerful about just being able to name where somebody is at and be like, hey, this is tough and I'm here with you. Especially with grief, when I talk about grief and stepping into grief with people, never making it smaller than it is, just so you can have the answer. But, being like, man, this is hard and I can't imagine. I think that's powerful. Hey, we are 8:00, a little after 8. And so if you have any final comments, post it now. But I hope you've loved the conversation and loved being part of this. We will be back next Wednesday, same time. If you'd like to join us Saturday morning, we are going to talk about chapter 4 of Galatians. And I'll tell you what, this is, I've been reading it a lot this week. I mean, cause that's the homework, but, Paul gets a little salty in this one. Like he's calling some stuff out. It's awesome. And so if you want to see the snarky side of Paul and, saying things like, I wish I could speak differently to you, but y'all are dumb.
I was going to say, but you're an idiot.
Tune in for that. That'll be on Zoom at 9 a.m. Mountain Time. You can get the link on our Facebook page, and we'd love to have you part of that. Or if you want to be part of the team gathering on Sunday, join us at 3 p.m. on Sunday. So
both Mountain Standard Times.
Both, yes. So, hey, love to have you part of the conversation, and hope you join us next Wednesday.